know what, I'm going to get started. Imagine we'll get guys in here, but what I wrote down in the beginning part is kind of introduction, so maybe we could go around, you guys can give a little bit of your background and what group you're coaching with and kind of, you know, what some of the challenges you're having are. Jason, I'm going to start with you. We kind of touched on it, but
yes.
You guys can hear that.
Jason Eckenberger, Marshwood 3-4. Really started coaching last year. No football experience whatsoever. Never played it, never coached it, so learned a lot. Head coach at 3-4. I coached with him at the cross, and he pulled me in just with my ability to work with the kids and try to progress them. So I'm on a pretty steep learning curve right now with football, but I love it, right? So I love the sport, I love watching it, I love watching my son play, I love watching the kids play in the backyard and work with them. So I have a passion for that. So I'm here really just to soak it all in and do my best to learn skills, fundamentals, techniques, and then how to work with the kids.
All right, George Spino, Greeley, 5'6". I had been an assistant and a boot coach with Scarborough Middle School for a number of years prior to having kids, doing that with my dad. Then after having kids, my son bounced around to 3 different towns because Cumberland, North Yarmouth really didn't have tackle football. So my oldest boy in 4th grade now played a year for Falmouth, and last year was Freeport, and I said, I need to try to make something happen. And I went in for my younger son and said, you got to do a 3-4 team and I'll head coach it. He said, we don't have a 5-6 head coach. Wait, what? I thought he was good. And so then I went and contacted some people. So I think that we got a 3-4 tackle team and then a 5-6 tackle team, which I'm really proud of.
Nice.
This past season, big challenges that we're facing. It's numbers in the, I think what you call it, the 5th grade and 4th grade this year. Like plenty of kids higher up, but I don't know if you guys have noticed in your communities, but other folks I've talked to, like I feel like COVID killed that age of variety in sports.
Yeah.
They're just not.
That was right when they were going to get started.
Yeah. I mean, in his 3rd grade year, so he's in 5th grade now, his 3rd grade year in Falmouth, there were 8 kids from Falmouth, 3 from Cumberland, 1 from North Yarmouth, and some other kid from Portland. And like we showed up to the first game with like 12 players. And that was a little bit scary that, one kid got a break. It's like, oh boy, don't get hurt, nobody have a bellyache. So I think getting the numbers up to a sustainable level for everybody has been during that grade has been my biggest challenge. But I love working with the kids, and I go back into it, like you said, love to do it, see it with your son and do it with him. And I got back into it. My kids were young, I just kind of got out of football, and then it meant so much to my son. Got him, out of his shell into a team, and I was like, I want this for all the kids.
Your varsity ended pretty successfully.
Yeah, I had a very good season.
Yeah.
Very good. Caleb does a good job. So I worked the many of the groups during the games in there, spotting for the Bears. I just try to give as much as I can to the football community in my town, because at the end of the day, like, no one's coming to save us. No external force is going to do it. It's I make myself better. How can I adopt responsibility for what's around me? Who does that? Who's better?
Touching on that, my name is Steve Casino, assistant high school football coach at Palmera. I've been in the program for 20 plus years. Since 2019, I've been at the high school, but for 15 years before that, I was at Brunswick Area Youth. 12 of that is running the league, all the way up to the middle school. Took the adventure in 2019 to go up with my other coaches up to the high school, and we've been successful there. It's still there. Our program was on the cusp of collapsing this year and just going away because we had nobody to oversee it, to run it, to try and restructure why we can't keep coaches in there, why our numbers are going down. So, community reached back out to me and everything. I said, well, okay, I'll have to swing double duties this year, but I've had 6 boys come up to me. I get a senior now, but I also got my surprise youngest, that's 3 and 4, so.
You have 6 kids?
Yeah, so after this year, I'll probably go down and spend the time with him and come up through the program with him. I really wanted to sit in, and it's been a while since I've done the youth level. I helped out last year a little bit, as much as I could, but I want to hear feedback on why we're losing coaches, and why you guys, as dads and younger coaches, what you're seeing, and why we ain't being able to continue to coach, and, you know, is it something the programs aren't giving, or the high schools, which I feel ours, are a little bit neglectful, not getting involved in programs to help build it back up statewide, because the numbers are down incredibly low, and all of them.
Chris Swenson, Wyndham. This will be my second year coaching. I coached flag football last year. This is the second grade, will be third grade next year. Like you, kind of watch football a lot, but taking the bull by the horns and getting involved with coaching football, getting your friend wide receiver some places as well. I'll be his assistant coach, defensive coordinator for the 3-4 tackle team. We're trying to get more coaches, and that's, you know, we get. Fortunately, our Wyndham program has pretty decent numbers of kids. Our challenge sometimes is we're in a funny number spot because at times we have enough for 2 teams and at times we don't. You know, so we're like, all right, what's that magic number to split into 2 teams? Because if you get 30 kids for 1 team, it's almost too much, but 15 per team is not enough. So we're working on kind of hopefully keeping it. 36 kids in second grade flag football last year, so we're trying to.
That's a great number.
Yeah. Hopefully keep about 75% of those in tackle, but I mean, we talk to a lot of the parents and they have concerns, safety concerns and those sort of things too, which I understand. And some of them are like, we may continue flag for a few years, you know, some of the other leagues that are around, and may come back into tackle, you know, as they get a little bit older. Which I can respect that for sure. So that's one of the challenges I think that we're trying to do is one of the things that I've looked at is, you know, the programs that we have to go through as coaches for Wyndham. They help us do the USA football program, which I think is great, is kind of emphasizing the safety part, that it's, you know, the amount of work that there's been done nationally to improve the safety of the players, recognition for injuries, but also the equipment, helmet technology and stuff like that. You know, football gets a lot of bad rap.
Yeah.
We get it all the time about, you know, long-term head injuries and that sort of stuff. So, you know, just trying to be an advocate for the sport in the area to keep those kids. Because, you know, flag football and a lot of dogs act, it's a lot of fun. To keep it in transition all the time.
Yep.
Challenge for one thing that talking about some of the middle school coaches they see is they'll do flag and they'll take a couple of years off, like I said, and they'll come back in 5th or 6th grade.
Yeah, that does happen a lot.
Yeah, so
You start seeing it in 3rd and 4th grades, and at the same time you get some of the new kids. It's weird coaching up. So with that, I give you guys a little background on me. I played. I'm a coach's son. My dad wasn't a football coach, but he was a basketball and baseball coach at Sanford High in the New England Basketball Hall of Fame, and was like really into coaching all the time growing up. So I, you know, grew up in a gym. Football was kind of my sport, and played at Sanford High. Played at Colby for 4 years. Played for Coach Dexter and Coach Misteri, who were out there. Skip Capone, who was usually around here, was my coach at the Shriners game, and I'm on the Maine Football Foundation with Coach Cosgrove and Coach Wolfgram and Dan O'Connell, a lot of those guys. But for the most part, I've been kind of away from the sport, and certainly not. I graduated from college in '95. I'm 50. So I kind of been away from the sport for a while. I'd watch it and do whatever, but the actual getting involved in coaching I hadn't done. My wife and I have 5 kids. First 3 were girls. So I had to spend some time learning soccer, and my ability to coach soccer kind of ended when they got about 5th or 6th grade. But my two youngest are boys, and they were interested in playing. So at the age of, I guess, 43, my oldest boy started coming through. So I started coaching 3rd and 4th. I've coached 5th and 6th. I've coached 7th and 8th in Sanford. And I've kind of bounced back and forth between the two. So I've coached probably 6 or 7 years at the youth level, some as an assistant, some as a head coach. And I definitely say that I learned a ton. And don't have all the answers by any means. I don't pretend to, because we all come into it with different sort of backgrounds, right? And what I wanted to do was put together kind of a lessons learned that I've had, with the idea this is like the perfect group because everybody brings in different experiences, has different challenges, and pretty much everything you guys mentioned I've had to deal with too. And I don't have the answer to all of them, but I can tell you because I've looked into a lot of these things. And so I wanted to pass along some lessons learned, starting with preseason, and then going into once the season starts, and then kind of like the game week and how that works, the goals. So my very first thing that I'll say is the importance of picking your assistant coaches. The challenge that we have at the youth level that they don't have at the high school level, they don't have at the varsity level, is there's no real interview process, if you will. Pretty much everybody that's coming to you, unless you're fortunate enough to have a guy that's just coached there forever, and hopefully is good, is that you're pretty much getting a pool of dads, right? Some with different backgrounds and different experiences and things like that. I will tell you that I think the most important qualities aren't necessarily a guy that knows a lot about football. It's really a guy that's, or a woman, that works well with kids. One of the things about football that's unique that you guys probably already know, it attracts a lot of guys that want to live out their childhood dreams, right? A lot of guys that think the key to football is screaming at kids because or to run the offense that they always wanted to run when they were kids, or the swearing or the any of that stuff. There's really no spot for that, and it'll be toxic for your environment as coaches if you have something like that. So your first instinct is to think, can I find anybody? I'm going to take whoever I can get. I'd really encourage you to work hard at the process, but to get good people, with the number one criteria being a guy that's good with kids. And then the fundamentals that you need to teach at that level and that type of thing, you can work in. The second real big quality that isn't apparent and it might fall on you is to be organized. One of the worst things that I've seen in a lot of these practices is not having your practice plan laid out. The first year that I coached youth, the head coach, we would show up to practice and he'd say, so I was thinking we'd do offense today. Adam, why don't you take him and do some drills, some offense stuff. You take the running backs. Jason, you take the line. I mean, practice is starting. We're all just getting out of work. It's not the time to do it. And it not only leads to a bad practice and poor fundamentals and everything else, it leads to so much downtime. In the fall, if you're anything like me, you got a job that you got to leave early to come to practice. And you got to do it even earlier as the season goes on, because it's not like basketball where you can rent a gym, the lights are on. It starts getting dark early in the fall, in May. So you got to be organized in your practices, and you got to be able to get coaches that are going to follow that. The second thing I would say, after you get your coaching staff, and it's good to have at least 5 or 6, even at this level, and then you can kind of gauge where you're going to assign people, so to speak. The next big step, and I highly recommend all of you do this, is to reach out to the varsity coach. I view our youth program in Sanford as being really a farm system for the varsity. And what you need to do is reach out to the varsity coach, ask to meet with them, and ask them, if you're coaching at 3-4, what are the 8 plays you want your 3rd and 4th graders to know? What are the 15 or 20 plays you want your 5th and 6th graders to know? What do you want your 7th and 8th graders to know before they transition into high school? And hopefully your varsity coach is going to be ecstatic. I had Mike Fallon, who's the varsity coach at Sanford. Actually, his first year of coaching was my junior year of high school. So he was assistant coach then, but he was one of my coaches. So he was thrilled when I did it, because that hadn't happened in Sanford. We had a tradition of having coaches come in wanting to run what they wanted to run. And as much as I loved running a power I or the veer option or whatever when I was in high school as a fullback, as much as I love that, nobody does that anymore. And our varsity most certainly doesn't do that anymore. And the varsity has a different name for everything, whether they're calling their linebackers Mike and Willie or Sam or any of that stuff, or whether they're calling them something else. Each of you guys have like a different vernacular to apply to what you call things. If you start calling in the 3rd and 4th grade and building up that football IQ, it's going to help a lot. And I got my practice plans really from the varsity. And it started with, how do you start your practices out? Right down to their warm-up drill. Like when the guys come on the field, what do you have them doing? And I went to some of the varsity practices because they start before we do. So I would sit down and I would go through the drills they did, the high knees, the karaoke, the shuffles, the lunges, all of that stuff, because it's different now. When I played, we would come out in a formation. We would do some jumping jacks. We had these stationary stretches. Everybody's into dynamic stretching now, where you're really running and warming up your muscles. There's all sorts of science that says that's different. I found, although I had like a decent football background, it had been dormant for about 20 years. The sport's changed. And I would go into the youth program with some of these guys that are still back in 1995, you know, and wanting to run it this way. And that's not particularly helpful, particularly when you get to tackling and some of these other things that the sport has changed. So it requires a bit of being humble when you come in. And that's harder to do for some of the coaches who come in, you know, telling you their football resume as soon as they meet you. It's like, oh man, that's awesome, but, you know, we're not running UMaine's offense anymore, right? Certainly in 3rd grade in Sanford. So, so kind of scaling it to that, but basing it upon what your varsity level does is important. I also asked the varsity coach, and this gets to building the program, like you're talking about, George, and the whole, you know, building that sense. We set it up so that in our first week that we start practice, the varsity coach comes down and he brings a couple of his players, and we get our kids on a knee, and they see these guys and they look up to them, the high school kids, they look up to the varsity coach, give a little bit of introduction, start talking about establishing a bit of a tradition. You know, when you go to the games, you look up to these guys. You know, someday you'll play for this coach. The kids love it. The kids absolutely love it when you get the varsity coach to come in, and hopefully your varsity coach would be willing to do that to address the leagues. Next thing that's important is getting somebody good on admin. We call it in Sanford the team mom, because usually it's somebody's mom that we'll reach out to that is organized. And we have in Sanford, the Sanford Springville Youth Athletic Association that's in charge of our youth football. And there are everything from getting the clock running, the announcement, who's going to be running the the lines, everything that's going to be needed for volunteer. You don't want to be doing that as a coach. Some coaches I've seen get stuck with that responsibility. You're going to want a team mom, so to speak, that's going to reach out and be in charge of the sign-up rosters, be in charge of making sure you got a copy of birth certificates, because under our league rules, and probably yours as well, another coach can ask to see a birth certificate. I've never seen it happen, but you're supposed to have all of that stuff. Have somebody that's going to handle your admin. You don't want to do it as a coach, especially if you've got a full-time job. And ideally, you'll get it with somebody, again, who's organized, who can do that. I've had the benefit of having the best team mom in the world and the liability of having the worst in the 6 or 7 years I've coached. You got to kind of follow that the best you can, but you need somebody else to run your admin if you could. Getting a large turnout has been something that we focused a lot in Sanford. We've had in the league, in the Southern Maine Youth Football League that we're in, I think only Saco, who just moved to the Friendship League, or what's the MP? Maine Sportsmanship League. And the reason they did that is because they could have more teams, primarily because their numbers are so high, which really attributes to the strong program they have. But by the way, a lot of the stuff that I'm telling you guys are based upon my observations of Saco years ago. They started, you look at the dominance of TA's program, I think it's directly reflected by the strength of their youth program, which they started about.
They gave us a little more.
What's that?
They're good. They gave us the time.
And they have multiple teams, and even at the youth level, their guys are running. You see in ring when they come out of formation, where you're taking your guy if he's in 3rd or 4th grade, and saying, "No, you're going to move here or there," and the refs allow. Saco comes out. These guys are pretty rock solid. Even in the classes I've seen out of them that don't have as good a talent, they've got a system set up that really it's a culture, and it's hard to turn the culture around in your town, right? It's super hard. What I've done, because my sons, they've had a lot of the same friends for years. It's getting them to reach out and do others. I'll get on the phone in the off season saying, "Hey, I saw Derek, he's big kid, strong kid, athletic kid. I'd love to have him play on our football team." I would reach out to kids and call them and get it, and I could usually get 10 to 15 more kids try out for our team by working it, and I would start thinking about that. Unfortunately, it's tough. I mean, a lot falls on you as the guy, but if you just wait till there's a sign up, it's hard. It's hard to get the numbers out and to create that. But I would ask my sons, I would look out, I would call other families that I know, we're a little concerned about getting hurt. Well, look, I'll tell you, this is how we run our practices. We're super safe. And kind of address some of those concerns, because a lot of times you're going to get that from parents. I don't want my son to get hurt. Or one of the biggest ones now is he plays year-round baseball. He plays year-round basketball. The sports have become so travel team oriented now that it hurts a sport like football that is really only one season. So it's having a lot of those conversations. It's saying, really at this level, having kids play multiple sports. Every single study that's been done on it, you look at the best football players in the NFL, Patrick Mahomes and others, these guys are multiple sport athletes, and it's just fun. There's lots of things, but you gotta call and ask to get the numbers out. And after we would have our first show up for signups, I'd go through the roster, I'd have my wish list saying we're supposed to have 45 kids in these two, in this group or whatever, how come we only have 26? And I'd start calling them, I'd start emailing them. It's hard, but that's what we've done. And our numbers our numbers have been good. We've been primarily for each class over 30 kids for the most part. So for like a 5th and 6th grade team, we'd have low 60s for a number, which is good. And we try to maintain that and we keep track of it. The hardest part is 3rd and 4th grade because you're getting everybody for the first time, unless you have the benefit, like you did, of flag, to do that. But I'd start banging the phones. Now, just before the season starts, I would have a series of meetings. I always have a series of meetings with my coaches. We come over to my house. I go over a few things. The first is, after we're joking around and talking or whatever, it is a couple really, important rules here. We don't swear in front of the kids. We're not yelling at the kids. We got to have a positive environment here. It is football, so there is contact, but we got to know that we're dealing with kids. And making that really clear, you don't want to have that discussion with one of your coaches as the season is going along. Or if you do, you want to be able to refer to that discussion you had before the season started. Remember we talked, that's something we don't do. I got it. I got worked up, I'm sorry, that's happened. But if I didn't have that conversation to refer to, then it just seems like I'm venting, right? So that becomes such an important part of that. I would also go through, in these meetings, I would have a printed practice plan for the fall, for the first week. And I'd hand it out to them, and we would go through as coaches. And it's at this time, if I get to find out whether the coaches know what certain drills are that I'm putting in, right? And a lot of these I get, again, from the varsity. Like, what are you looking at from, so if you don't know the drills or if you don't have them down, it's not a big deal. That's why it's less important that you know football or knowing how every hour and a half practice goes than it is that you can be willing to put in a little time and follow it and tone it down to your group. So the first 10 minutes of every practice starts the same with us, and it's exactly what Sanford High School does in their practices. Players come on the field, we start doing our dynamic stretches, we go through, we then end in a circle time with the coach saying a few words about how practice is going to go, what we're going to be focusing on today, and then we break out and we run our practice and we have it set. And before I do that, I give a handout to all the coaches, especially, this happens more before the season starts, and as the season just gets started, and then it can be less and less because they can look at a printed practice plan and know what we're doing. We don't need to meet every week. But in the beginning, I would always have a few meetings with my coaches. Do you know when I say, the 4-cone drill, what that means? If I'm assigning it to a coach in a breakout session that we're going to rotate through. And you got to ask those questions. You know how to do the hawk tackling drill. Do you know how to do this, or 3-point stance properly and all of that? I would go through it with my coaches to make sure they knew what they were doing, and everybody knows what right looks like for each of those drills. So we would go through that in our pre-practice plans. So that's sort of pre-season, leading up to preseason. Yeah.
So how early does your program select coaches?
So we usually choose the head coach right around SSYA works, where we'll have a meeting in April timeframe, and people that want to be coaches, talk about, we go through the different grades, who wants to coach this, who should we ask to coach that. So the head coaches typically know by the spring, and that's when the head coach needs to start. And sometimes it's like, hey, I can't take head coach this year, I'll take offense or whatever, if you're dealing with the guys that you've dealt with before. But the head coach, ideally, you should know by the spring. I don't say that to stress you out if that's not what you guys do, because we've certainly had to replace coaches or find somebody just before the season starts. That's happened too. It's not a perfect system, but ideally that's when you're finding out.
Yeah, I know for us, so the football board actually, we use a lot of coaches luckily our varsity coach says but like they will apply like December, January timeframe. But they just did interviews, mid-February, and then the head coaches know. They knew 2 weeks ago if they were going to be selected as a head coach for this year. So with us with 3-4, we got 2 teams, slated to have 2 teams, but we've already talked to, we know everybody, so we've already thought, like, hey, we may just get by practice.
Coach Dex, what's up, buddy?
If we need, so that we're all running the same thing, no matter what.
Good to see you.
But yes, our head coaches don't have to. If they're coaching next year.
It was a little bit, I didn't find out officially until like July.
Yeah.
He was kind of clear on what they wanted. It's the same, yes.
Yeah, so like, it's a buddy of mine, one of the 3-4 head coaches, is getting a team with Larry. Nico and I have been talking for a while, coaching together.
Guys, real quick, Tom Dexter, football coach, legend at Cote, was my coach back in the day. He's the one that they were joking, where's Dexter? There he is.
I went for a walk with my daughter.
Yeah, he's a great quarterback in college and coached at Cote since the late 80s, early 90s. And how are your kids doing? His son was one of the best baseball players ever graduated from USM, and
That's played for the Sanford
plays
Mariners.
for the Sanford Mariners.
Yeah, both my sons.
Yeah.
And they're both still playing pro baseball.
Yeah,
30 and 27.
good genes there, Dex.
Hey, listen, my wife is the breeder. I know her now. Nice to meet you guys.
Nice to see you, brother. So yeah, that's sort of like the preseason approach and prepping. And I'll tell you guys, one of the biggest ways to set yourself up for success is not so much to be an expert in football. It's to put in the time to be organized. It's such a key. I've been a part of both systems. The one where you show up and sort of wing it because we're so smart, and of course we can do this. Attitude versus this is what we're doing between 5:15 and 5:25 in practice. That's the type of team you want to run. That's the type of team you want to coach in, and it's reflected in the games, frankly.
That's probably you got to stay focused on that. That's like huge.
Absolutely.
You set your 15-minute windows for your station. They don't run 60 minutes. They run 15 minutes.
Yep.
Coaches adapt to get everything I need to get in that 15 minutes. Because once you let the kids start going sideways from a norm or routine, that was not just the kids, but us coaches too. You get sidetracked. 15 turns into 25, then have to practice and gone, and coach hasn't been able to do anything.
Yep. I have had, and you got to stay on them. Like I would get to practice. So let's go through the first week of practice. All right. First week in Smithville, and it's probably like this in the others. It's no contact. In fact, it's pretty strict rules on your. Basically, it's called conditioning week. What we do in Smithville. So you're not supposed to be doing your plays and doing all of this. The awkward part of that is your first official week starts the following week, and if you're in a youth program, you're not practicing 5 days a week. And then that weekend, you probably have a jamboree. Marshwood has hosted the jamboree, we've hosted at Sanford. A lot of them, jamboree is basically you scrimmage about 5 different teams in one day. They get the ball for 10 minutes, you get the ball for 10 minutes, it's kind of loosey, gets you started, but then you start real games the following week. So there's like a tight ramp to get your season started. When you're dealing with 3rd and 4th graders, or at any level, frankly, up till 8th grade, you're getting kids. On our 8th grade program, we have kids that are playing football for the first time. So you've got to account for that. So what we do typically in the first week of practice that we do the conditioning piece, the first day of practice I ask all parents to show up. I want to talk about that for a minute. The same way I was saying, you have that discussion with your assistant coaches in the beginning. We don't swear, we're not yelling at kids. This is how we're running practice. This is what our goals are. This is what you're going to get from me. I do it to the parents too. I ask all the parents to go there. We have sort of a sportsmanship. This is my responsibility. This is your responsibility piece that we hand out to all the parents and ask them to sign it. And when the kids break to start the practice, the very first practice, the head coach goes and talks to the parents. I'd like to see all the parents right now. You got the assistant coaches running the first practice, and you have that discussion with the parents. You tell them who you are. You tell them, you're going to take good care of their sons. You tell them what your background is, your goals. You're going to be focusing on safety. You're not going to see me swearing and yelling at your kid. You're going to be doing the following things. This is what you want them to know. You're coordinating with the varsity coach. You're setting a good environment to have them learn. Everyone's going to get playing time, that sort of thing. And then you turn it and you say, I expect the following from you. When we're out here on the field, we're coaching them, you're not coaching. We ask that you get them there on time. One of the hard parts about football, a lot of times at the lower grades, are attendance. And say, it's hard for me as a coach to ask to have the kid run when he's late for practice when I know he doesn't have a driver's license. So I'd ask that you really make the effort to get them here on time, and on time for us is 10 minutes before practice starts, because we got to start on time, and then I give them the talk about it gets dark in Maine early, we've got a lot of work to do, we're going to focus on this. So you really let the parents know what the standard is. Now they're not all going to meet it, but you let them know. You give them your cell phone number and say, if you're going to be late, let me know, or send me a Facebook Messenger. You also introduce them to the team mom or the admin person, and you make it clear what their role is versus your role. Please don't come up to me in a game or at a practice and talk to me about an issue that you have with your son. Please don't post it on Facebook. Please don't do this, please don't do that. If you have an issue, please talk with me about it. I'm a volunteer, I'm a this, I'm a that. Have that type of discussion with the parents, because football, more than most sports, is going to get some energized parents that think about when they were playing, the ref sucks, the coach doesn't know what he's doing, my son's an all-star. You get a ton of that in football. You get a ton of parents coaching from the sidelines. You get a lot of that. And you need to be able to tell them not to do that. And it's awkward and it's hard, especially because a lot of teams, usually it's some dad who is like jacked and ready for something, and he's pissed because his 3-year-old, third grader isn't awesome. You get a lot of those dynamics in football that you've got to kind of manage, and it's hard. And I've had to pull parents aside. We've had to tell parents, if this happens again, you're not going to be welcome at games. That's really hard. But you've got to be able to do it because you're representing the program, and you got to make sure that when the kid is on the field, the kid looks to you for direction and not his dad who's yelling at him saying he should be getting the ball more or whatever. Ask them to communicate with you privately about concerns. That's going to be an issue. It's probably an issue more at the youth level than it is at the high school level, because a lot of times by the time you get up there, you kind of know who the good players are and this and that, and where you're seeing, trying to live out the dreams of the parents, you're seeing a lot of times play out with the kids, and it's hard. But you got to have that discussion with the parents when the first practice happens. Also in the first practice, one of the things we like to do, it's about the only time we do it one later in mid-season, is we do some of these team building things where we'll do a 40-yard dash, we'll do some cone drills, we'll do vertical leap, we'll do height and weight. Some kids get sensitive about their weight, so you got to kind of make sure you're just doing that over the side as one of the drill stations that we do. But we'll do sort of like a fun version of a combine for the first day of practice. Kids actually love it. They love to see how high they can jump. They love to see how fast they can run. They love to see how quickly they can shuffle. They love to see how many push-ups they can do in 2 minutes, how many sit-ups they can do in 2 minutes, things like that, and they go through. And it also helps us as coaches, because a lot of these kids we don't know yet, and you're getting a sense of their athleticism, you're getting a sense of their speed, you're getting a sense of their strength, a lot of those things. So we do that in day one. And we also ask the kids, when we're going through, we'll have one coach do it kind of casually. It's usually the one that has the station with the vertical leap, the height, the weight. We do that in one station. So where are you hoping to play this year? What position? Oh, I think I'm a quarterback, or this or that. And you just get a sense of like what their preferred position is in discussions. And then they'll rotate through and they'll go through. A lot of kids won't have a clue what positions are. Another thing that we do so then the next few days of the first week of practice, we do a lot of conditioning, but we mix it in with our football IQ stations. And you're gonna wanna do this with all your kids, do the football IQ. And we start literally with, what's the goal of the offense? How many plays do you have to get a first down? How far is a first down? When the quarterback is underneath, and then we'll go through, who's the guy that snaps the ball? Then you call a kid out that might end up being a center, but it's a random kid. This is the center, the left guard, the left tackle, the right guard, the right tackle, the quarterback. You talk about what each of their roles are. This is during one of the practices that week. We focus on football IQ for offense. It's usually after we smoke the crap out of them. They're all exhausted, they're all tired, most of them are out of shape. So we have them sit for a little bit in the middle of practice, and we do a football IQ. And we describe the roles of every position. We will say, now, if this hole between the center and the guard, if we get to call that number 1, and we call the one between the guard and the tackle the 3 hole, and the outside the 5 hole, and then on the other side it's the 2 hole, the 4 hole, the 6 hole. You just start saying that, and then you'll say, what's this hole again? 2. What's this hole again? 1. Okay. You go through, and this is the quarterback, and we also call him in our offense the 1. Okay. What's the quarterback again? 1. And then we have running backs 2. Okay, and we'll set them up. So we're teaching them football IQ while we're teaching them how we describe things in the Sanford offense. So that the next practice we do the same thing for the defense. What's the role of the nose guard, the tackles, the ends, the linebackers? This is what they do. We call them out, and we'll constantly be doing the check on learning thing. So they're learning that in the first week, and then we also go through, as we're advancing on this, we start teaching them the basic building blocks of how our offense works, which we'll do the set, ready, hot. This is how we do it. This is under center. This is pistol, shotgun formation. And we will describe that to them while we're doing the football IQ, and this progresses over a series of practices, so that when we start saying aces left, 48 sweep, they know aces, okay, this guy, this is aces, this is red formation, again, building on the building block of what our varsity calls things, and then say 48 sweep, so it's the 4 back going through the 8 hole is wide, or it's 31 dive, right? 3 back through the 1 hole. And everybody has a different way of having their offense, but that's how we start. And we do that even with the 7th and 8th grade. We definitely do it. And varsity, frankly, they do a much speedier version of it. Because at 7th and 8th grade, I'll often have kids that it's their first time playing football too. And none of them want to be embarrassed that they don't know any of this stuff. So we start at the most basic level of saying what a center does, what their job is, what the linebacker does, what the cornerback does. We do it all the time, and we're constantly reminding them how it is. We show them what our huddles look like, how the center comes out first. We do all of those things in the football IQ phase to build those building blocks. Now in season, kind of transition to that real quick, and then we can open it up. One of the biggest changes for me, probably for you guys too, when you played when you were younger, is the whole concept of tackling. I was taught when I played for Dex, a lot of these guys, your head goes ball side, you're driving through them, all this stuff. Now they're into the hawk tackling thing. That was hard for me to sort of learn how to do that. But you got to follow it. The USA football thing, all sorts of scientific studies. Whenever we start working into tackling in Sanford, we have a progression in our practice that works up to that point. And it's the form tackling drills, it's the hawk tackling technique, it's all of these station drills that we'll go through before we get into the tackling drills. And the tackling drills, we have one to start, and through the season, they're quick whistles. And we're looking for guys, not wrapping up, we're looking for good form. Before we do every tackling drill, we will call the whole team together and I'll give a safety brief. Now we're gonna get into tackling. Oh yeah, awesome. Or some kids get nervous, right? That's always what happens. But you give them the safety brief. Hey, as a reminder, head up, pull your neck. Just like in the hawk tackling drill, what we're looking for, you grab cloth, you're rolling, you drive your legs, all these sorts of fundamentals, you give them a safety brief. Listen for the whistle. Coaches are gonna be on the whistle. We'll be going through and you walk them through what you're gonna be doing in the drill. And then you get them hyped up and they do it. And there are lots of drills I'm sure you guys could look up for tackling drills and others, but that's how we always do it, and we always do a safety brief before we do it. I found a couple things that I want to pass along. One of the big challenges when you have the younger grades is understanding what positions kids are going to play, and also playing within the weight requirements. You get kids that hit 100 pounds, 125 pounds, they're only going to be in certain line positions. They're going to wear stripes, right? Sometimes those kids, those of you that followed, high school football this year, one of the best running backs in the state was Jordan Bissonette from Sanford. That kid was a beast when he was younger. He's 235-pound running back for Sanford, playing in the Shriners game this year, and he's fast. And when the kid, he wasn't able to play running back until he got up into 7th grade. If you saw him when he was in the lower grades, the kid was incredible, but he had to play on the line.
Sorry, Coach, can we move you guys to breakout room? We're 10 minutes over.
Oh, we are, yeah, because the pizza thing. All right.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you, Coach.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, they told me to prepare